Welcome to the Living Springs Q&A podcast, where your questions are answered live every week by the pastors of Living Springs. Thanks for tuning in.
Check 1, 2. Okay, if you are tuning in, we're having some issues with the video, while our audio listeners, if you are just tuning in because you are an audio podcaster, sorry for the pause. Blake's on tech today, and I'm not blaming Blake, but we did have an issue right when we started where there was some sort of something not pushed, a button, I will say, not pushed that should have been pushed.
We may lose audio for a second.
And we may lose audio for just a second as Kyle is messing around with things. Why don't we just start this whole thing over?
We can't.
We can't?
Nope, so just hold on for 1 second.
All right, hold on. And we're back.
Audio's back.
At least audio's back. If you are watching us on YouTube, no, you're not. You're just hearing us on YouTube, assuming this is streaming there. But if you are listening to us, I'm going to just continue to talk while Kyle works frantically to solve this and Blake looks on. We all have our roles, and talking continually, saying nothing, is mine. So there you go. And, I see something happening on the screen, but then it's gone. But
I should have told you that camera, I just believed it was going to work.
We are frantically trying to solve this issue, and we will do our best.
We will lose things again for just a second.
Here, and welcome to everyone. We're going to have to do some editing post everything, although this goes straight to the YouTubes, so everybody will get a chance to watch it with all of our flaws. It's interesting times when you are trying to wear a lot of hats, and issues they never taught you about in Bible college, and you're really good at responding to them, Kyle, and unplugging and replugging things in frantically and pushing buttons, and I assume you know what you're doing, but the rest of us just kind of sit here and watch. But it's just an interesting world we live in.
It is.
It's another indication to me of how things have changed from 2 years ago. That what we are doing now for ministry. We've all read the book Canoeing the Mountains, where he talked about how you didn't go to Bible college did not prepare you for the world you are in.
Not at all.
And that was written in 2016.
Yep.
And it's only that much more true in 2021. But welcome, everyone. It is great to have you with us. We are officially here now.
Woohoo.
And fully here, we're saying in faith that this is going to end up all the places it needs to end up. We will end up on...
We're on Facebook. We got Dorothy King commenting along with us.
And it's on YouTube,
and
I'm
YouTube's
assuming.
going. We've got a live...
And we'll assume that it will end up on Spotify and Apple and Google and all of the other podcast locations where it can end up.
And they may have no idea what we're doing depending on how we trim this thing. So there you go.
We are here, and we are ready to go now that everyone's welcome. And you just see the two of us. We're really excited that in another couple of weeks, this can be gone. That's it for those of you who are listening. The screen that's between Kyle and I.
You may be excited. I'm a little scared.
Why?
This has been my protection when I'm going on my heretic rants.
Well, maybe
I'll be back there. I'll be refereeing you guys again.
Maybe don't go on your heretic rants. I was going to say, and this week we have Blake on cameras. So there you go. You just saw Blake, although if you are listening, then you didn't. But say hi, Blake.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Without any controversial jerseys on this week.
No, just straight up plaid.
But you picked the right jersey last week.
I did.
There you go.
Big winner.
So, all right, so let's get into our first segment.
What do I push for that? Oh, that's sorry.
Time for accusations, explanations, and recantations.
There we go, and we've got
This is podcast episode number 1. It seems like episode 1. This is the first time we've ever done this based on how it started.
I was feeling good until everything went haywire.
Your brain gets foggy when
Yeah.
anything goes wrong, and then you're not remembering anything from that point on. So we're all gonna make some mistakes. But you probably heard the new audio voiceovers there.
Yeah, it's good.
Because we wouldn't have heard on this end, but Adam, Keelan's husband, is a sound tech, and he's helped us out. Did some big voiceovers for us.
The question is, did anyone hear that? Because I think we were talking over it.
That's true.
So why don't we do that again now, Blake?
All right. It is time for...
And then hit it one more time. Or not. Or just
Oh,
click on it.
I clicked... Sorry. Yeah, I see.
Time for accusations, explanations, and recantations.
There we go.
We got to be close to 300 episodes.
This is episode 234. Exactly.
Oh, so we're not close. Okay, but we're well past 200 this week. If this is the first time you've watched or listened to the podcast, I promise you we're normally more coherent than this.
We lost our 2 YouTube watchers at this point. So.
Yeah, they're like, we're out.
This is ridiculous. Anyway, so for our
Apologies.
accusations, explanations, and
yeah.
recantations this week, we are going to finish off the question that we started last week. And Blake actually ended the podcast on with a little bit of a teaser because you asked Kyle a question that was related to the question we were still discussing. And the question we were discussing was this. The question is more theoretical and opinion-based, obviously, but do you think that if Adam and Eve had immediately acknowledged their sin and run to God instead of hiding from him, that they still would have been kicked out of Eden? Now, I feel like we did answer that
And
question.
I think we all agreed.
Yes. And then you veered off into heresy, and we didn't get a chance to fully... Now, in all honesty... because we discussed this for a while after the
Just
podcast.
about an hour we looked
and
at
in
after.
the
Yeah,
end,
there was a good hour.
it was we were more in common than we thought.
Yes.
And perhaps things hadn't been articulated the way that we
So I
wanted
can
them
jump on
expressed.
there. The
Yeah,
one
so-
most direct one that I want to first answer, because immediately after I asked Blake clarification on this last question he asked.
The question that he ended the
The
live
Blake
stream on,
asked was-
that Blake asked, it was a teaser for this week, was Blake asked you, Kyle,
Yep.
do you believe that
somebody
would have eaten of the tree of knowledge of
so
good and evil?
I took that one as in, do I think somebody in subsequent generations would have made that choice? Because the way I was trying to talk about it was there are 2 choices: eat of the fruit or follow God and learn wisdom. In that, and we can a little bit more to discuss there. I thought it was eventually, absolutely. If it hadn't been Adam and Eve or Cain and Abel or whatever next generation would have come, somebody would have made the choice to eat of that fruit instead of following God. The way the question was intended was, would Adam and Eve eventually have eaten of that fruit because they had ascertained a certain level of wisdom that was now permissible for them?
and that was based on
The discussion we had.
how you had begun answering that question.
Yeah.
Both Blake and I took from that answer, although
Yeah.
I don't think you
No.
said it, but what both of us said, and from some of the feedback I got, what other listeners heard,
Yeah.
was that you thought eventually God would have brought them and said, now you're old enough, it
Totally.
is time for you to eat of this tree.
And that is not what I went to. I think it's 2 opposite roads. And so from the beginning, my thought was never that it was both. It was either or. And they can lead to... How to phrase this now. It can lead to the same function by the end, but one is good in following God and building and trust in Him, and one is taking those decisions into our own hands. And so but it can never be both. Once I guess it can't be. Yeah, it can never be both. It's one or the other. Follow God and learn wisdom. And this is where kind of our post-podcast debate really landed. Was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a bad translation from what I've come to understand. The tree of the knowledge of good and not good, or lack of good, would be a more accurate translation. And so to learn what is good and decide that in my own effort, in my own eyes, is to take of the tree and to decide, I want this, therefore it's good. The language that even Adam uses or Eve uses, saw it and desired it. That same language follows all throughout the Old Testament, probably most prominently when Adam desires Bathsheba, saw her, desired her. David, yep, you know what I mean. That language kind of carries on a bunch of times to show it's this choice: are you going to follow God or are you going to follow your own ways? to have followed God, Adam and Eve would have grown in continued understanding of Tov, what is good, and in my mind, also then understanding and an awareness of Ra, which is lack of good. By knowing what is good, you know how to avoid what is not good, is the premise there. And so they would have had a similar level of knowledge without the specifics of the what ways bad has been taken. And the example I used in our post-podcast discussion, we'll have more, I'm sure. Sex was a good thing. To know Tov of sex, you don't have to know all the specifics of pornography and child abuse and rape and sex trafficking. You don't have to know all the specifics of Ra to have a somewhat awareness of Ra. And Ra is not necessarily morally evil, and this is where that translation comes in bad. It's lack of fullness of goodness. And the other example I used was farming practices. Adam and Eve, to cultivate and expand the garden, would have continuously learned better practices with farming, and therefore growing into further Tov, giving them a level of awareness of Ra, though it's not morally wrong, there's a better way to live. And I'll stop there and leave it open for more discussion.
And I will disagree with you.
I know you will.
Because I think that going from good to better is not the same thing and does not give you an awareness of what is not good. Whether you make it whether you include a moral component or not,
Yeah.
there's a big difference between good and better and good and not good. So,
And this is where I go, if the knowledge has to be passed along, walking with God into further Tov is beneficial in knowing Ra alongside the benefit of the human relationships generation after generation. If, let's say, Adam's great-great-grandson decides to start farming and goes, I know what I'm doing around the farm here, and he can have knowledge passed along both through God and through human generations and relating, don't try that. Don't try planting soybeans next to tomatoes. I'm just making stuff up because that didn't work out for us last time. They use the same nutrients. So that is the level of Ra that is not morally negative.
yes, but I would still say that even the indication, the attitude that I know what I'm doing is a fallen nature attitude.
But
And
even
this
in ignorance. Like, hey, I'm going to plant these tomatoes next to these soybeans. And
that's
going,
where I
yeah,
see-
but that's not a good idea because we tried that these generations ago. That's stepping into further Tov and away from Ra.
And that's where I would say there's a difference between good and better
Yeah.
and good and not good.
And I just go, I don't think that's the language that's set up in Genesis.
I'm being very gracious here and saying we can just agree to disagree,
Okay.
and you want to argue.
I will
I'm
leave it there.
I'm trying to not, but I do think there is a difference
Yeah.
between more Tov, between growing in from good to better. To use
Yep.
the example I used last week.
Yeah.
If you lived your whole life in a lit room
Yep.
and the lights were at 30%,
Yeah.
and then somebody turned it up from 30% to 50%, you know more brightness. You
Yep.
still have never known darkness. And so that's
We'll
where
leave
we
it
will
there.
have to agree to disagree. Blake, do you want to throw down on here?
Yeah, I've thought about this.
Don't forget to put yourself on for the.
Sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
I've thought about this for the week since we've talked because that conversation. You challenged me a lot, Kyle, which I appreciate. And most times I'm like, yeah, okay, I can get there, I can understand. But this one I had an issue with. Like this, and I am okay in saying that I'm in process here and I'm like thinking this through. Because
Yeah.
my knee-jerk reaction last week when you said it was this idea that, first of all, that God was going to somehow let them in on the secret. And I
Right.
was like, that's not what I read in that
Right.
Genesis account. And then the second, after we'd talked for the hour, then you led me to what you guys were just discussing. Like, is there a difference between good and evil? Is there really like a dividing line, or is it just this blurred kind of understanding?
Right.
And I definitely was brought up to believe there's this like definite line, right? And
Right.
I don't know that you're saying there's not. It just, that's where my mind has gone is,
I think there's a line along the way somewhere, but lack of good does not immediately mean moral evil is I guess where I go. I don't know where the line would be, and it might be situational depending on like how far do you have to go before farming practices get morally evil. But at the same time, something like lying, I think there's a clear line right there. Again, that one could be debated for hours and hours, but lack of good and a moral negative, I guess, go to zero. There's zero goodness in this. It's still neutral, morally speaking, but there's easily lines that you step into, and you can continue, I think, to get worse and worse beyond that. So I'd agree. There's a line for somewhere, but it might be situational.
So,
All right.
all right. We'll
I
leave it
appreciate
there.
you being honest. This was much nicer than the hour-long discussion we had last time.
Well,
I appreciate it.
Well, that's
probably
because
just got-
eventually we understood what you were saying.
Yes, that's
there was
true.
a point, like honestly, and if people watch, and I don't remember, probably wouldn't it be on YouTube? But there was a point when you were answering this question that Blake and I both looked at each other like, he didn't just say that, because you really heavily implied
Yep.
that God would have eventually said, all right, it's time for us to come and you guys to eat of this tree.
And yeah, especially once Blake asked that question, I thought I had been clear enough in the sense that it's one or the other, that I thought there was no way he was asking the question the way he was. I thought it was, do you think somebody would have down the road chosen it? And I thought, oh, of course.
But he asked that question
To clarify.
because of what we
Was
both
implied.
kind of taken
for sure.
from what you'd said earlier. So,
Yeah.
but just so everybody can be clear,
There you go.
Kyle was not that heretical last week on that topic.
So that was our
He
own
was just unclear.
accusation, explanation, and no recantation, I don't think. Like, in a way, maybe.
Yeah. So let's move on though to
This week's questions.
This week's questions, and there's a couple of really good ones. I love
Yep.
the two that I don't know if we'll even get to the second one.
I don't
The
either.
first one is a fairly long one, so I'll read the whole thing, and then we will break it down and we will discuss some different parts of it because there's a lot of layers here. The question is this: what are some practical ways I could try to figure out God's purpose for me, or even what my passions are? I've been a lifelong people pleaser, and I'm realizing that I can't think of any passions or dreams of my own because I've stuffed them away for so long in order to accommodate or care for those around me. I know God has a plan for my life, and though I don't minimize the importance and value of taking care of the people in my life, I feel like I'm meant for something else too, but I have no idea what that would be or even how to start figuring it out.
Man.
I'll let you start this question. I just want to say I
Sure.
love these questions that are real life based.
Yeah. I want to say and I'm sure we could all join on this one. And we emphasize this a lot of times when we get these real pastoral questions that, to be honest, I wish I wasn't receiving this question with a microphone and a camera, but a coffee and a chair across from me, right?
Yeah.
To be able to talk to this, because there's a lot that we can say in theory answering this blindly in front of an iPad and in front of a camera that's different than when you're walking with a person through this struggle. And we see the
Absolutely.
struggle in this question.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot on there, and if there's any point though in how we communicate, what we communicate seems impersonal, please know that is not our heart. But we do approach these questions to a degree as well, theoretically, in this format.
Absolutely. And I would also just say, along with that if we say something, whoever asked this question, if we say something that you would maybe disagree with or maybe raise some more questions, feel free to have a coffee and a chat with one of us. We would love that.
Please
We'd
do
welcome
that.
opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start off in the very first question of the very first of these questions. What are some practical ways I could figure out God's purpose for me? To answer that one generally, I think a lot of those are already laid out in the Bible of what we are to do. I think the Sermon on the Mount that we spent 11 weeks on already this year of going, what does it look like to be a kingdom citizen? The idea of figuring out God's purpose for me is to love God and love others. Jesus simplifies it even that much. That is as simple as it gets, and I think sometimes we aim for more lofty American dream type purposes that everybody's going to do a big thing all the time, and the content of the New Testament doesn't seem to have a lot of that for the average person. So I think the purpose is what humans are created for is to live in relationship with God, with others, and I believe I even maybe add a third one, and the creation he's given us to enjoy. I think those are the three relationships we are meant to be sitting in and cultivating deeper and deeper enjoyment into. But heavy emphasis on those first two because those are the two that Jesus mentions. But I think we were created for certain environments also to enjoy that environment. That is the base purpose for humanity, and I'll stop there before we get into further discussion.
I would be in a very similar place than you. I would go in a little bit of a different direction along the same lines. And I would say I can appreciate this question. I've asked this question in my own life many times through my 52 years on this planet. And so I can totally relate to that. However, I will say I'll say personally, having asked this question
Yeah.
over 52 years, the question has changed at different points in my life and at different points of, I guess the older I get, the perspective changes.
Right.
And so I don't know the age of this person. For me, when I think of God's purpose for my life, I find it along the same lines: love God, love others, enjoy creation, and I would kind of put in with that those are the means to the end of Christ came to give us life and life to the fullest.
Yep.
And life to the fullest isn't typically found where we think it is. Like you talked about the American ideal, the American dream, and I know we're not American, but we're so influenced by America that the North American dream is pretty much one and the same as the American dream, because in Canada it's the same idea. That to enjoy the life that God has given us, that Christ came to give us life and life to the fullest. And there was a point in my life where I kind of looked at it, and let's go to an Old Testament analogy of Moses, right? Moses had this great call on his life, his great purpose for his life. And then he tried doing it in his own strength, and he spends 40 years in the wilderness. And then near the end of, after 40 years, nearer to the end of his life, because he lived a long time in the wilderness, all of a sudden that purpose is revealed. Everything is restored. We love those stories. We're amazed by those stories. Where my heart goes over the years of dwelling, of meditating on that story, thinking about that story, is I wonder, I remember somebody once saying, why was Moses in the wilderness for 40 years? Because he wasn't ready after 39. Right? And
I like that.
I can't help but wonder if what it took 40 years for him to understand was, it's not about that thing.
Right.
It's about learning to just be with God and enjoy God and serve God and love others.
Yeah.
And when the whole pursuit of his purpose was finally completely dead, and he was just in a place where he's just loving God, loving the people that are around him, that God's like, now you're ready.
Yeah.
And so I think, what's God's purpose for my life? To have life and life to the fullest. And I know that doesn't directly answer this. I don't believe that directly answers this question. And I think we're going to get into some practical ways. We're going to talk about that. But that's just my initial thoughts in line with what you said. Blake, over to you.
Yeah, I think I'll continue on with what you guys are saying. Definitely agree biblically that's what our purpose of life is. And I want to get deeper into it, and I know we will.
Yeah.
But I think the danger on the flip side of that is, and you kind of mentioned that with Moses, I just think of history. I think of people in history who have done, amazingly big things, and church or Christian leaders or whoever who have done something that we think is phenomenal. I think if we think of that as being the purpose for life, then we are all looking for this experience that we're going to have where we're going to have this massive influence.
Yes.
The problem is I can only think of like a number of those people, and yet we know billions of people have lived on this planet.
Yep.
So did everybody miss their purpose? Like, was everybody supposed to have their 15 minutes of fame or their life of whatever? Mm-hmm. And I just can't get myself to that. I just think that God probably expects a little more simplicity out of most of us than what we want, especially with an American dream that everything's going to be awesome and it's all about me. There's just something simpler. And I think you touched on it already, Doug. I would just say being with God. I mean, we just read that book, all three of us, in the last little bit here. Yeah. There is something to a relationship with God that is better than, and what God wants more than, a moment where we have massive influence in this life in some way. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll stop there.
So I think we've done a good job of articulating a basic baseline of what God's purpose might be. But the question is, what are some practical ways I could try to figure that out? Mm-hmm. And so maybe we should go there next.
Sure.
So.
You go ahead. I'll cultivate some thoughts on that one.
Okay, so a couple of things, and you want some practical things, and I appreciate the practical things. Here would be, for me, when I'm in a place, and I still get there sometimes, where everything gets cloudy and everything gets muddied, and that's part of what I read in this question. Right. They genuinely, this person seems to genuinely love serving and caring for others, but everything's muddied right now, and there is this, well, who am I? Where am I in the midst of this?
Yep.
And I want to be honest, and I think we all go through seasons like that. We all go through difficulties like that. And so I can appreciate that. Here's how Doug deals with when things get muddied and when I lose the joy in serving and when I lose the joy in being with God and in just the simplicity of life. What do? Number one, I pause. I hit the pause button. Sometimes that means just taking a few hours to just go for a drive. Sometimes that means taking a day to pray and just kind of just go. I'll go to the mountains and I'll pray for a day because I know I need it.
Right.
Sometimes it's just hitting pause on some of the things I'm doing and going, why am I doing this? Because there's many times in my life where I have been doing the right thing for the wrong reason or from the wrong motive, and then it's the wrong thing.
Yep.
I can be pastoring this church with the wrong motives and for the wrong reasons, and then it's the wrong thing. And so for me, there's always this need to regularly step out of the busyness of life, and it seems like what I'm reading into this question is there's a lot of busyness in this person's life.
Yep.
There and genuinely good busyness, not a bad thing.
Yep.
But Dallas Willard, who we've quoted
Many times
on this podcast.
And many more to come, I'm sure.
Yes. He talked about how busyness is the enemy of the spiritual life.
Yep.
And he's like, being hurried is the enemy of the spiritual life. We all live busy, but when that busyness turns into a hurried life, that's when we have a problem.
Right.
And you see this modeled in Jesus, that Jesus' ministry demands start to crowd in on him, and then he withdraws because he knows he needs that. And so the first thing I would say would be to give yourself permission and figure out some ways that you can carve out some time to just sit silently with God. That's a very personal advice that I follow regularly, and I will be honest enough to say this. On the one hand, whenever I take these times, on the one hand, I look forward to them because I've seen the value of them, and at the same time, I dread them every time I'm in these muddied states where everything feels frantic and everything feels rushed, and there's always too much to do. I will say to Laura Lee, I need to take a prayer day. And my wife is very gracious, and she's always like, okay, when do you want to go? And I'll be like, I don't have time. And she'll be like, no, you need to do it. You just said you need to do it. When are you going to do it? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have time.
Yeah.
And she'll be like, go do it. And part of that is because I feel overwhelmed with the thought of doing it. Part of it is, honestly, because when you're in this hurried place, the thought of going to be still is not appealing. And so it takes tremendous discipline. I'd like to say to you, you're going to drive out to the mountains. It's going to be nothing but glorious times of you and God, and it'll be wonderful. And maybe that'll be it. I'm not saying it won't, but I'll say for me, there's tremendous discipline in stepping out of the busyness of life that I start to find my identity in, even though I know it's not right. Yeah. And then in letting go of all of those things and unwinding, it's a very painful process, but it's also a very necessary process. I'll leave it there. That'll be my first thought.
Yeah, I'll jump in there because we're doing honest conversations about listening prayer, Laura Lee and I, on the weekend, and that is one thought that has come to me is the only way to do listening prayer is stillness, which you guys talked about last week, you and Laura. And that is so hard for me. Right. That is a discipline that I need to work at all the time. And even on Sunday morning, Doug, as you were speaking, I was sitting in the back and I had my journal out. And I was like, man, the irony of this is it's not lost on me in any way. That I think I don't have time to spend with God. That there's things that are more important, right? And it's just puzzling to me that I can allow myself to believe that so often. That I got so much to do. There's so much important things. There's so many ways. There are things pulling me in different directions that I don't have time to step out. Yeah. And then it obviously shows my priorities are all wrong. Like I get to be number one in that situation because I need to do all these things.
And I'm important.
Yes. So that's not lost on me. And I think the other thing that I would say to adding to that is taking that time with God, but also just for Aaron and I, this happened a few years ago. Actually, it was just like we didn't have a plan. Like
Right.
we realized we'd lived 15 years of marriage or more and just reacted to everything around us with great intentions, thinking we were doing very good. We were helping people. We were serving in a church. We're doing all these things.
Right.
But realizing we had never planned anything. Even all our kids, we have 5 kids, and it was like, oh, this is a good idea today. Let's do it, right? Like, it was, there was very little planning. And I have appreciated that both of us have kind of held each other accountable in the last few years to say, let's plan this. Let's not just react, right? Like, even our vehicle has broke down and we need a new vehicle. Like, rather than just rushing to the dealership and get another vehicle, it's like, well, let's plan what the next few years of vehicles would look like, right?
Yeah.
It's very freeing to me. And you said the word permission, Doug, and I really like that. You actually have to give yourself permission to do it, or for me, it'll never happen.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate what both of you guys are saying, not to disagree with any of it. I think even both of you hit 2 different angles of it, and I think I might hit a third one of, and maybe this is the stage of life I'm in. There have been a lot of times where purpose, especially how you define it, my purpose is sitting right in front of me, like with three little kids in the stage that I'm in. Yeah. There's a lot of responsibilities, and even just over the last 2 years, there have been situations that I've faced that I had no control over whether they happened or not, and I have no ability on when they're going to go away or not. Mm-hmm. And I'm stuck into them. And instead of...
I hope your kids aren't listening to this podcast.
Allie often does listen to it during the day while it's live. So, but I remember hearing a sermon. I thought this was funny. I'll share it here too because I think it fits. Somebody was sharing statistically your level of fulfillment in life and happiness in life dwindle as you have kids. Your overall base level happiness drops when you have kids. That's just a fact. And I think any of us who are parents can understand where that's coming from. But that does not negate that God is still at work. And I think there's sometimes where, not in a negative sense or an apathetic sense, I've had to resign myself to this is the stage and the purpose where I am. Yep. And I have to go, I want to see God in the midst of it and have him give me the strength that I need for what I'm facing, because whether I want it or not, this is my purpose at this time. And so the people that are facing this, the person that's facing this, there may not be control to be able to change the situation or rejig or transform to where you want to give your attention to. Maybe this is where God has placed you for a time, but there's a major difference in being able to do that with God and see purpose and gratitude in it than trying to just change your whole life. And I'm not saying that we don't care about I really want to emphasize, like I sympathize for you and empathize for you, but I think there's some times where I've had to resign myself to this is where God has me. Would I be able to see this in his way? Just to hit that as a third different spot.
Well, and I want to make sure that they don't think that my point was negating that.
No, I didn't hear that.
When I talk about things getting muddied and then going and getting clarity, I come home to the same house with the same kids and the same responsibilities, and the result of all of those times that I've done that through 26 years of ministry at Living Springs has never led me to a different church or changing of a careers. What changes for me has never been the external. Yeah. It's been me that's changed. Yeah. That there is a transformation, a change that takes place in my motives for why I'm doing things and my reasons for doing them that begins to restore the joy and the life that Christ offers. The fullness of life that Christ offers. So I'm with you 100% in that. Yeah. Absolutely. For me, that's always been an exercise. So I think there's two ways you can always go. One is something needs to change. Yep. And then we've all dealt with people who, and whether it be a career change, there's people who family change. Yep. There's some people buy new things, buy a new house. Change can be external. Yep. Change can be internal. Yep. What I have found in my life, and again, I want to just say to whoever asked this question, we are answering this question on general terms, not knowing your specifics. What I found in my life is that I need to step out for a bit, right, so that I can get my head screwed on straight, so that I can re-engage with the reality that is my life, and I can find the fullness of life in it.
Yeah, which I think
that's what I wanted to say.
I think that could. Oh yeah, sorry.
No, just to say, I'm not debating you.
No, and I didn't hear that in your answer. I was just kind of making sure to clarify that, because I think sometimes when I've stepped away for reflection, it can be I've been doing this thing and I need to let go of that. And so I can come back from those times of reflection or retreat and go, okay, I know there's some things I need to get rid of. And there's other times where I can't get rid of anything, but my head's back in it the way I need to be, which I think can lead to the next part of this.
Well, before we get to that, though, I think we just should ask, do we feel like we've answered the first part, which is what are some practical ways? Have we done that? Is there anything else before we move on?
I think so. Especially, yeah.
Blake?
Well, I think it'll be kind of part of what we do next. But I mean, I think passions and I think giftings, I think God gives us things we like and dislike that all play into maybe what gives us a little more joy and fulfillment in life. So I think we should go there.
Okay.
I'm hoping we're touching on that. So
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we answered the first question before we moved on. So then, okay.
I think so.
Or even what my passions are. Is that where you want to go?
Well, I was going to lump that with the next part because I think those two go together. Maybe it's the way I'm reading it.
No, that's fine.
Being
So
a people
the
pleaser.
next part, I've been a lifelong people pleaser, and I'm
Yeah.
realizing I can't think of any passions or dreams of my own because I stuffed them away for so long in order to accommodate or care for those around me.
Yeah, and that's the part that I go, those things you may end up doing the exact same tasks with an entirely different mindset.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what I'm really looking at it. So it doesn't have to be that God's placed you in a spot where it's all about you. And I know that's not what I think this person's saying. I'm just speaking in hyperbolic terms to make the case. But I think sometimes we may get right back into the exact same tasks. I'm still changing the same bums at home, still cleaning up food spills on the floor, just to use that one to the practical, really small thing in my own house. But I'm doing it with a different posture, and it's not my passion. That is not my dream. But the purpose and the place that I've been entrusted does go there, and I have really struggled with in times of my life, and my wife acknowledged she is listening. My wife can attest to this. I have been driven by people pleasing for a big part of my life, and it was when she broke up with me when we were dating that I was really thrown into having to refigure that out. I had put making her happy as the purpose of where I found my worth, and our breakup changed something in me in that, and I've worked on it for years since. And it's given me an ability where I can be doing similar tasks to what I was doing in serving her, trying to find my value in that and how good of a boyfriend I could be. I can do the exact same task out of confidence, and this is where God's placing me to be able to love my wife and find joy and fulfillment in that versus striving for value of my own. And so I think the people-pleasing thing layers onto the passions. You may find the exact same tasks as what you're doing without having to feel suffering under the weight of trying to keep everybody else happy. I'll leave that there for a bit.
Yeah, I'll jump in there because as a people pleaser myself, so I can identify with you, Kyle. I think there's kind of two ways I look at that. I would separate the two because, again, I did have small children at one time and had a lot of them all at once. And there's no free time. Like I did hate, if I was in that scenario again, I was thinking to this podcast and I'm listening to myself, just go away to the mountains and plan your life. You're like, when, right? Like there's just no time. So I understand that, but that is different. Like to me, that's not people pleasing. That's just, you have to do that. That's life. You have tasks that need to be done. That's responsibility, right? People pleasing can get me in trouble where I feel like my value comes from doing lots of things for lots of people. That's what God wants me to do. That's what my family expects of me. So I'm just going to make myself really busy pleasing a lot of people. That is trouble. And that has got me into trouble, and I watch other people get into trouble that way too. If your value comes from that, that's an endless pursuit of chase that is never going to fulfill you, and you are going to get just drained.
And if this person's dealing with young kids, you are never going to get that affirmation.
No, that's true too.
Right? We don't know the specifics. But we've all been in the place with young kids. I didn't have 5 at the same time like you did. I'm not as crazy as you. But kids are by nature not grateful. And so you live a people-pleasing life and you're like, can't you appreciate what I'm doing for you? If I just, when you said, I want to just address that, somebody might think, when do I have time to go to the mountains? I do think, to maybe back up for just a second to the practical ways. One of the things for me is realizing that if it's important for me to figure this out, I need to put other things on the back burner to do it. And those other things that go on the back burner can't be the other responsibilities that I have. They have to be the things that I normally turn to in my time.
Yeah.
So my personal time, when I get to the end of the day and I want to just turn on the TV, or if I want to go for like a 2-hour run, or if I want to just veg out and, watch a movie, those are the things that got to go that I have to sacrifice in my pursuit of God and hearing what God wants to say to me.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, I read this a while back, I don't remember where, but it said we often settle for refreshment instead of pushing into God for renewal. And it's really easy to just, at the end of a busy day of taking care of everybody else, go, it's my time, I'm going to just turn on the TV and there's a TV show that I've been waiting to watch. We all have been there. We all can relate to that. And there's nothing wrong with watching that TV show unless my soul needs time with God to work out some of these deep questions that I'm wrestling with. Because then when that show's over, those questions are still there. I'm still exhausted. I'm still hurried. I'm still in the wrong. Everything's still muddied. That's the word for me that I get in my own life. Everything's still muddied, and tomorrow's still coming. And so just to back up the bus there for a second, because I do think it was worth saying when you talk about when can I go to the mountains, I don't always go to the mountains.
Totally.
But in the evening, there are times when it's my time, and what do I do with that time? And that I'm not trying to be hard on this person who sounds exhausted. But I do think when you have those moments, for me, I have to choose the harder path of pursuing God and wrestling through things and letting God speak and taking time to hear what God has to say and then wrestling through the implications of that instead of turning on the TV. So,
and again, I'd draw a line there, right? Like if we have responsibilities where we have tasks that need to be done, then yes, like you say, Doug, it's going to have to be on my time that I get that refreshing, or I do my time with God or plan or whatever else. On the other side of that is the people pleasing to me, which again, I'll talk to because that's me. I think we read a book, was it Gordon MacDonald that wrote a book, an old pastor?
Ordering Your Private World?
Yeah. And I just love the fact that he said in there that he wanted to give people their best. So he would say no to people and he'd actually tell them, I can't give you my best right now. But if you talk to me Monday or Tuesday or we meet next week, I can. That gave me massive permission to say no to people with the premise of actually like being truthful and saying, I can give you better if I do this later. Because of people pleasing in me, I'll just go from person to person to person to person, and then I'm not giving them my best at all. Where, I think of Jesus, like obviously he had a lot of stuff to do. Like he could have gone from person to person to person forever. But he actually withdrew and went away and found solitary places because obviously he knew he needed to refresh and get ready so that he could give his best when he was with people. So I think that's a practical way that I am learning to deal with that.
I think everyone is I think the idea of people pleasing, some people say I am or I'm not. I think it's a sliding scale. And everybody's on somewhere on that scale. But one of the things for me that has I've come to realize, and I'm less of a people pleaser.
No. Sorry. I couldn't help myself.
Is that you? So people say I don't know how to say no, and when they say it to me, I typically respond with, "You just did." Like you do know how to say no, and what you don't realize is that you constantly say no. You whenever somebody asks you to do something, you are saying no to a million other things.
Right.
What you have a problem with is saying no to someone's face. Because what you're saying no to is all the people who aren't in your face in that moment.
That's exactly
And
it.
I'm not trying to be harsh on this person.
No,
I'm really not.
You're right.
Right on.
But for me, where I'm less of a people pleaser, by my own admission, and by I think most people would understand and would recognize that, like I've seen this happen where people go, well, I can't say no, but you just said no to your family. You just said no to your spouse. You just said no to whatever else. What you can't say no to is someone's face. But you can say no to everyone who isn't currently in your face.
Yeah.
Because you only have 24 hours in a day and you only have 7 days in a week.
Right.
And there's only so much you can do. And so for me, there's just this realization that I'm always saying no.
Yep.
And so I don't have, like, the fact that you have expectations of me, there's times when I'm gladly take on those expectations. But if those expectations are unrealistic and they're going to come at a cost to some other place in my life where the expectations are realistic and should be higher,
Yeah.
then I'm going to say no to you because I'm not willing to say no to that.
Yeah.
So
That's fair. I was going to, I guess, link that a little bit to the part of the passions and maybe, I guess, doorway into that a little.
Yeah.
I have found when my life has been most consumed by pleasing others, even the little bit of time that I do have left for myself, I would even maybe exchange the word passions for joy, and maybe back to the refreshing versus renewal part that I also find I don't then seek joy or refreshing or whatever. I just lose a bunch of time. That's when all my habits of good eating go out the window, exercise, just finding joy anywhere else in my life because I just want to fall back into nothingness.
Oh, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so,
Could totally
right?
relate.
So guarding that time and guarding that perspective to find joy even in the little things, even it may be, to use the example of TV, I can easily just let whatever's on be there and not even care versus turning on a show and even just being present enough to a TV show to find joy in it and to find that. And I think that's even a difference because I think sometimes we can get so exhausted as a lack of energy in our soul that we can't even find joy somewhere. So I'd even add that on top of passions. It doesn't have to be that I get out running or exercising or reading the books that I normally do. I can just lack the ability of enjoyment in those states.
Let me also say, I believe we live in a world that is chronically tired
Yes.
because we all are going way too fast all the time.
Yeah.
Like, we don't think about the fact that 100 years ago, do you know that if you went from Calgary to Edmonton, Airdrie was the first day stop?
Yeah.
So it was a multi-day trip, and if you left Calgary, the end of your first day, you were in Airdrie.
That's wild.
Like that, and that was 100 years ago. And from 100 years ago till the beginning of time, that was the pace we moved at.
Yep.
And today, we don't think anything of the fact that I could get up in the morning and be on the other side of the world by bedtime, or I could this doesn't apply to, I think, any of us, but there are people who work in certain fields of business where they would get up in the morning, fly a 3-hour flight for work and presentations, and then fly home that night.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that we should, just all go back to walking everywhere, but just realize the toll that the craziness of life that we live in takes place on us. And for me, one of the indications of my life that I'm fatigued is I'm losing joy in things. And I'm just tired and I'm just worn down. And I think this person, and I don't know where this person can find space to rest, but I would encourage this person that you probably do need some rest.
Yeah.
And I don't know the specifics of your life, but if there's a way to carve out some more time for rest, and even if that means sacrificing some me time to get a little more sleep at night, I found in my life that I remember someone on Instagram put it a while ago, and I don't remember what it was. It was like revenge, stay up late procrastination. And it was like, when life gets you really, really, is really, really busy, and then you get to the end of a crazy day and you're like, I just need some me time. And then you end up staying up till 1 a.m. because you just need some time to veg out and just be, and you're going to pay for it the next day, but you're like, and that net, you're the only one who loses in that.
Totally.
But I think there's an element of just recognizing maybe for this person, you're exhausted. I can't find my passions when I'm tired. And then I need to rest and figure out how to rest without shirking the God-given responsibilities that I have. And so I would just encourage this person, if there's way to find some rest, to step out of some things, to say no to some people who are putting obligations on you, to be able to find some rest would be a big deal.
And I think maybe we're kind of bouncing back and forth all over the place on this one.
Yeah, but I think there's a whole lot of. I pictured this question like I think you said it during one of the prayer series,
right?
That it's a multi-sided diamond, right? There's a lot of elements to this.
Yeah, totally. So I would say practically to start doing this, one of the best things I have found is, as well as everything we've already talked about, finding that time with God, I would also encourage you to speak to somebody you trust and consider wise to balance that out. To talk, hey, what can I do? How can I find these passions? What do you see in me? That's those kind of things. Bring somebody else in instead of just trying to solve it on your own. Get some outside perspective can be helpful. Yeah.
Blake, do you have anything to add? We're almost out of time.
Yeah, I wanted to add that passion thing because I think that is important. I've seen that in people's lives. And again, today I'm just speaking practically from my own life and my wife's life. When our kids got older, I could see my wife was just drained. She was just tired of being mom, even though I thought she did an amazing job of it all and the rest. But when her and her best friend decided to open the clothing store that they opened, man, did that refresh her. Yeah. And I think there are things in life that you do need to, you do need to find something that puts fuel in your tank. I mean, you guys run, right? That would never fuel my tank. But
you don't know that because you've never tried it.
I did. It was terrible.
You tried it once.
I'm going to talk about that on Sunday. That's one of my stories that is coming out in my sermon, or on Saturday night. So watch the live stream if you want to hear my running story. But
you notice he said story
one time. But yes, I would say in that time that you spend with God, whatever you do, where you rest, all those things, starting to figure life out and moving forward, find out what you really fills your tank. Like, what are you passionate about? And then carve out time for that. It doesn't necessarily have to be this godly task. God wants us to enjoy this world. That's what you said right off the top, Kyle, that there is enjoyment on this planet for us. God created creation for us. Yes. Yeah. And we can enjoy that. That is part of fulfillment. So I would say figure out those passions. Even if you ask a friend what it is, whatever.
Yeah. There is a whack load more to be talked about in this question.
Absolutely.
That I'm just going to acknowledge with 7 minutes left, we don't have time to cover it all. So we will continue this one next week. I'll preface that now. I'm sure we've still got time, but
well, do we want to preface this? Because I'm just wondering. I feel like we've done a good job of answering this question. My thought is to encourage whoever asked this question to sit down with one of us for maybe a one-on-one. Because I feel like we've maybe given as many general thoughts as we can. If you think there's more, we can certainly bat it around some more next week.
I'm just looking at some of the latter part of the question. I know God has a plan for my life and don't want to minimize the importance of that. Maybe we've covered it all. But I just looking at it and going, maybe the bigger idea of how we look at purposes of life from a Christian perspective and how that's been shifted and tainted in some ways.
Okay, well, why don't we start there next week? So we'll do that. But we want to, again, apologize for the beginning of this podcast when everything was kind of a little bit off. We do apologize for that. We have come a long way from the beginning of COVID, if you go back and you watch the first few videos that we did, but we are all still amateurs at this.
Yes.
And we are very, very grateful for people's grace. Yeah. We're very, very grateful for Kyle's expertise.
Yes, that's for sure.
Thank you to both of them for that. And we will let you go with that and have an awesome week. Thank you. We are not at the end of questions, but we have been in the last few weeks kind of getting closer to the end. So if someone has a question, we would love to have you send it. questions@livingSpringsAirdrie.com. Yep.
Or you can go to our website, find the podcast there under resources, and there's a way to ask anonymously if that's a preferred method.
Yeah. Or you could text us.
Yep, totally.
Any one of those would work. But thank you for sending in your questions. If you have questions, and we got some good questions coming up. I'm really excited about some of these questions that are going to be in the next couple of weeks.
With our few minutes, I will acknowledge I have been trying to keep on top of the comments that are coming in, so I can acknowledge a couple people's comments before we leave. Dorothy was agreeing with us on the Old Testament, God working through Moses. We got Adele commenting, we carry big items. We can feel God's purpose is bigger, few and far between. Sorry, just trying to sum that up. Over on YouTube, Allie says, check out Every Moment Holy. That's been a book that we've used, and some prayers and liturgies through normal day stuff. There's one for changing diapers and doing laundry and all those kind of things. Josie comments, giving people permission to step out and do what you need to, not being afraid. And then last, we got another one from Dorothy just asking how many people go on a date night with their spouse. Do you guys pastors, when was the last time you went on a date without your with your wife without your kids?
Last night.
Hallie and I, it's been a while. Hard to get babysitters in COVID. But even before COVID,
night,
we're like 5 or 6 dates a year at the most.
Well, our date night is in our house most of the time. Like,
yeah.
We'll just put Leah to bed and then get a meal and just spend some time together. We don't go out nearly that often since COVID. Yeah. COVID's changed everything.
We'll get Noodle Box and watch TV shows at home.
We do not get Noodle Box. We get something good.
Erin and I do movie nights. She's been away for like a month, so
it's been like a week.
Extrovert
and a half.
Blake is dying.
It's not been a month.
Well,
she had COVID.
She had
3
COVID.
weeks ago.
That was terrible. COVID, and then she went away.
I got your back, Aaron.
Business, and then she went on a holiday with my daughter without me. That was crazy. So I'm venting here, but probably a month ago. We go pretty regularly. We do date nights and go to movies. So
cool.
We'll pray for Blake's bitterness.
There you go. That's so I'll try to keep more engaged with the comments along the way. I feel like we're having really good discussion. So thanks for following along with us, commenting.
In a couple of weeks, we will have, because restrictions are changing, and we will be able to have all 3 of us at this table again, and then we'll be able to have Keelan back, and maybe we'll be able to manage because right now we're just kind of, it's a bit of a scramble.
Yeah.
And so maybe we'll be able to engage with the comments during the live stream, during the podcast, a little better than we are right now.
I saw them as they were coming in. Just felt like I would have jumped into a tangent, but wanted to address them along the way. So we'll be good. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. And now we're gonna try our quick outro here. So Blake, you want to hit 5? We'll be out of here. Maybe click on the preview window first. Use the mouse to click on the screen where it's now hit 5.
And then hit 5.
This has been the Living Springs Q&A podcast. If you have a question you would like answered or would like to learn more, visit us at livingspringsairdrie.com. Thanks for tuning in.